Alright, we are ready for using RBC add-on. So to summarize, we have a collection with all the parts and a collection with just the 5 main parts of the car, which are the car body and just the 4 tires. Double check that you have these 5 parts correctly in this collection. So I am gonna select these 5 parts, the car body and the 4 tires from here. Just check twice that you have selected only 5 parts. I'm gonna press N to pull out these side menus. I'm gonna find RBC add-on. So if you have the paid version, you can use the quick rig function that makes everything for you in one click. But I want to show you the workflow that comes with the free version of the add-on. So I am going to click on car and finally add rig. This is going to generate a bunch of stuff. It's very easy to understand. So you just select the car body and in the add-on, just to say this is the vehicle body. Then I'm going to select this tire here. And in the add-on, I'm going to say this is the front right tire. I'm going to select this tire here. That is the back right tire. And then there is this tire here that is the back left tire. So just click on this button. And the last tire, that is this one, is going to be the front left tire. When you are done assigning these 5 parts, I'm going to simply click on Generate Rig. Now, two things to notice. You have, first of all, a car that is ready with all the physics. If you press the spacebar in the keyboard, you can see, let's restart from the beginning. You can see that some physics are already set up for you. You don't have to do nothing for setting up the physics for your car because it is everything made for you by this fantastic add-on. So there is one problem. You can see from the side view that we lost the alignment with all the other parts of the car. So don't worry for this. I just needed to move up the car. But from now on, you don't have to move the car moving the actual object of the car. Whenever you want to move the car, you have to control it using this object here that is called rig control. I mean, this mesh that is below the car is made appositely for controlling the position and the rotation of the car whenever you want to, for example, to start the animation with the car in another position. So I'm gonna take this and move it up by pressing G and Z until everything is aligning up again. So for this purpose, I'm going to turn off the rotation of the specular light so I can see better what's going on. And so G and Z, and until they align perfectly again. It's just a matter of moving in the perfect vertical direction, by the way, not in other directions. For example, from here, I can see that they are not aligned. Let's see the doors, G and Z, and it would be something like this. Okay, there we go, a little bit lower. There we go. I think I got the point. We can probably change the studio matcap or something like that here. G and Z. All right, this looks cool to me. Let's see the alignment here. Perfect. I see the alignment in the door. Perfect. Cool. Let's proceed. Now, so at this point, if you press the spacebar, you can see just the car falling down like this. Instead, if you have the paid version of the add-on, you can go under Controls in the add-on and the keyboard, and there is this button, Start, that is basically switching Blender to game mode. And when you press this button, you can use the keyboard to actually play with the car in real time using the keyboard. This is fantastic. By the way, you don't necessarily need to play with the car if you don't have the paid version, so you can just go on working even if you have just the free version of the add-on. So I'm gonna create a new collection. Actually, I'm gonna use this collection. I'm gonna rename this collection Colliders, like so. And with this collection selected, I'm gonna press Shift A to create a sphere and put the sphere a little bit with distance from the car. I'm gonna go in the physics properties in this icon here and activate rigid body. I want this sphere to be rigid body passive, so this, and also activate the animated, which means that now we can do this. Press space to play the animation, and while the animation is playing, I'm going to select the sphere and press G to move it and start hitting the car like this. Well, probably yeah, it's not above the car. Let's move it here and let's try again from frame 0. So I press space and then with the sphere selected and press G and start hitting the car. You can see that they are interacting in real time. So two things to notice. My favorite settings for the rigid body world. Let's go here under rigid body world. So these 3 values, we need to take these 3 values under control constantly. First, substeps per frame. These 24 substeps are literally too many. I'm gonna decrease these substeps to 4, which is very low, but in my experience, I noticed that low substeps gives way much a more stable simulation, and also they are gonna increase the speed of the frame rate during the playback because your computer needs to do less calculations. And also for the solver iteration, 48 are literally too many. I'm gonna decrease this to 12. Now, if you restart the animation from frame 0, you will notice a faster playback in the animation. This is basically real time, 25, even faster. And now we can start to work properly. So now I wanted to check the speed of the rigid body world. So I'm gonna start to hit the car like this. I noticed that yeah, the frame rate is real time, but the car looks a little bit slow, I would say. You can see that it's not in real life everything is much faster. So to adjust this speed, we need to go here, rigid body world speed, and we can change the speed. I'm gonna change this speed to 1.6. This, in this case, should give me a more realistic speed in the physics simulations. Let's see, play the animation, start hitting the car, and you can see that now the speed is much more realistic. However, you have to take into consideration that the speed of the rigid body world goes together with the speed, the response of the animation. So you must have a real-time response in the frame rate that you read here. Otherwise, you are not going to be able to judge properly if your physics simulation is too fast or too slow. Cool, let's proceed. Another thing to say is that these values sometimes change because of the add-ons. I think it's something related to also to other add-ons that I have in my computer, but when I close Blender and reopen it, for some reason I find these values are reset. For example, the substeps are gonna be reset to 8. The speed will change sometimes because of the add-on, so just constantly check these 3 values during the entire course. Alright, let's proceed. Now, as always, whenever we are making some new stuff or changing something, let's stay always on frame 0 so that we avoid any type of problems. Alright. Now, there is a very important step that we have to do. First of all, you have to understand that this is the original model of the car, and you can see that there is also another object that is the rigid body of the car, which is responsible of the collision, or the physics, dynamics, basically. For now, this object is not selectable, even if you try to select it. Later, I will show you how to make it selectable. So for now, what I want you to understand is this. If you play the animation and take the sphere, move it, and start to gently touch the car, interrupt the animation, let's stay in wireframe mode. Basically, right now, the collisions are happening immediately when any collider is immediately close to the car, which can work, but can actually be a lot better if we decrease the size of the rigid body until the collision will happen a little bit more inside the car, like here. And I actually want this type of collision to happen all around the car, not only on the top. So for example, here the collision are going to happen exactly in the border here, here, and here, because the rigid body is basically covering the car. So what I want to do now is to decrease the size of the rigid body until it's something like more inside, something like this. So that basically the collisions are going to happen a little bit more inside, like this. And this is going to give me a more realistic deformation later, like this, because the metal is going to go inside. And also, by doing this, we're going to have a proper contact between the car and, for example, the road whenever the car will start to roll over. So, in poor words, just do the steps that I will show you right now. Let's stay on frame 0. Staying on frame 0 now is crucial. So let's get rid of this sphere and let's replay the animation. Let's see. Okay, frame 0. Basically, the first thing to do is to parent all the parts objects to the car body, which is this object here, right? So first of all, select all the parts objects in this collection, and then holding Shift as a last element, only as a last element is very important, from the 3D viewport, hold Shift and select also the body of the car. Alright? So you should see something like this. If you did it correctly, you should have selected all the parts of the car except the wheels. And if you try to move it, you can actually check that you did it right. And you can press ESC to abort this operation. So it's very important that in wireframe you check that the car body should be yellow, basically, because this means that you correctly have selected the car body only as a last element. That now is the active selection. And this is very important because now I'm going to press Ctrl P, set parent to object. Alright, and this means that now if you select only the car body and try to rotate it or move it, you will see that all the parts are following perfectly the car body. Now this is just a temporary thing, just for this part of the tutorial. After this part, I'm gonna immediately unparent all these parts, alright? So let's proceed. Now, I want you to try to select the rigid body of the car that for now is not selectable. You can see that if you try to select this, you can see these lines here. If you try to select this object, is not selectable. So, if you go in the outliner here and go inside the RBC add-on collection, there are a bunch of objects. If you scroll down all the way, you should find this called Vehicle Body RB. It's not selectable because you simply have to activate this icon. for the selectability. Cool. And this means that now we can select actually the rigid body of the car, which is the object that is surrounding the car. It's called vehicle body RB. I require your maximum attention in this part because you cannot do any mistake. Now, I want you to enter in edit mode and stay in vertex mode here, and maybe activate also the transparency here. So the concept is we can scale it first in the length and then in the height. So I'm gonna do this. First, press A to select all the vertices. Up here, it's very important that you check that this is set on median point. So I'm gonna press S and then Y. You can see that we are locking the scale only in this dimension here. Basically, I want to reduce the size of the rigid body a little bit like this. You will notice that the car is starting to rotate with all the parts as well. Don't worry for that, because once we are gonna scale also in the vertical direction, everything is gonna self-adjust automatically for you. So let's decrease the size until we create some space for the deformation in the front and also in the back. Something like, I would say, this is fine. Alright, now I'm gonna press S and Z to scale the vertical direction, like this, and you can see that the car is self-adjusting the rotation for you. Awesome. So just create a little bit of space around the borders, and you can see that finally I have enough space for the deformation. Let's see if I can push it a little bit more. Yes, look at that. And also I'm gonna do the same from the front view. So I'm gonna go in the front view, or you can use, as always, these navigation buttons. Just go in the front view, and I'm gonna press from the front view S and X. And this should not rotate the car. Yeah, it's actually rotating a little bit, but not very much. I'm gonna scale it down just a little bit like this until I have enough space for the collision and the deformation. Let's check the rotation from the side at this point. Let's see if I can adjust it a little bit more, and yeah, all right. So now basically we have created space for the collision. Every time this car is gonna collide with a wall, it's gonna collide intersecting the wall apparently like this, which is what we want, because this geometry, however, is gonna deform and compress inside in this direction. So this is gonna create a much satisfying and realistic deformation, right? So now let's go out from edit mode. So let's go in object mode, and I'm gonna go in solid view now. So first click outside in order to deselect everything. I'm gonna find the collection called the parts. I'm gonna start from here, holding shift. I'm gonna select all the way all these objects, and with the mouse here I'm gonna press Alt P and choose clear parent and keep transformation. And this is basically gonna finally delete all the parenting between these parts and the car, which means that if you try now to move the car or the rig, these parts are not going to follow anymore. We did this parenting only for avoiding to lose the alignment in the rotation, in the location, in this particular step that we did. Alright? Cool, we can proceed. And now, if you want to test if this happened correctly, you can actually play the animation, take the sphere and try some collision very slowly, and you will see that the sphere is going to intersect the car a little bit before the collision is going to happen. Look at this. And this is what we want, 100%. Awesome. Let's see also from the bottom. Cool. We can proceed with the next step. Actually, let's put this sphere apart. Alright, it's time to make the deformation of the main body of the car. So just to summarize before doing it, in poor words, I'm gonna use a mesh deform to deform the body of the car. Instead, for the other parts of the car that I want to deform, like the doors or the bumpers, I'm gonna use a different system, like using the surface deform modifier instead of the mesh deform. But you're gonna see why later. And actually, the entire process of deforming the body is gonna be pretty different from the process that I will follow for deforming the doors and the bumpers. So let's begin. In the outliner, I'm gonna click on this icon in the upright part to create a new collection. And where is my new collection? All the way down here, there we go. I'm gonna call this collection Deform Meshes. And with this collection selected, I'm gonna create a new cube, mesh cube. Make this cube very big like this. In wireframe mode, let's check that this cube is more or less in the center of the car. Not very important the exact position, but just try your best. So I'm gonna stay in solid view now, and let's stay inside the cube so that we can see the car. Alright, staying inside the cube, first of all I'm gonna press Ctrl A and apply scale. This is very important, otherwise we're gonna have some different results each other. Now I'm gonna press Tab to enter in edit mode, press A to select all the faces, right click and subdivide, right click and subdivide again, right click and subdivide again. So we can exit from edit mode finally, and we can go in the modifiers tab. I'm gonna give a bunch of modifiers now, starting from a subdivision surface with a level of 2. So we have a lot of geometry that are going to help us for the deformation. The second modifier that I want to give is a shrink wrap modifier. In the shrink wrap options, I'm going to use this pick tool to choose my car original mesh as a target. Pay attention to choose the right object. It's not the rigid body, it's the car body original mesh. Alright, and now when you click it, you will see this mesh kind of wrapping around the car. Now we can do two things. First, I want to work only in the body of the car, the original mesh of the car. So let's try to select it. There we go. And holding shift, I select also my new deform mesh that I am creating and isolate both of them. There we go. So now to clearly see more exactly what's going on, I want to go here and choose random. And now with random activated, you can see one different color for every mesh in the scene. And this is going to be very helpful. So for example, I can increase the offset of the shrink wrap a little bit because my goal is to cover the car entirely. There we go. And now the car is completely covered. Just don't exaggerate with the offset. Now I wanted to rename this mesh. So deform meshes instead of cube. I'm going to call this deform body. When you rename some objects in random visualization, they change color for some reason. It's okay. So now another thing that I wanted to do is if you go in this arrow and activate wireframe, you can see the actual geometry that we are creating. This geometry is a complete mess. So for this reason, I'm going to give also a remesh modifier. In the remesh modifier, we can activate the smooth shading and we can actually check how it's going the topology. So in the remesh modifier, we can hold shift and increase or decrease the voxel size option. This is too much high resolution and is going to be very slow during the deformations, and this is too much low resolution. Of course, it's going to look very bad. So something in the middle, something that you think that is going to give you smooth deformations. And by the way, later we are going to need to check the total amount of vertices that we are creating for just this mesh. My goal is to have something around 2000 vertices, and if I remember well, a density like this should be 2000. By the way, we cannot check it right now because we need to apply these modifiers, but for now let's just don't worry, let's save. So after this remeshing, we need to adjust by consequence the offset of the shrink wrap. So just a little bit holding shift so that you have a precise control over the increments. Yeah, we have some little parts like this left outside. Don't worry for them. We are going to adjust them later using another system. For now, this is okay. Let's check from the side, and I want you to notice one thing, especially in the front part. Usually there are some hard corners, we can say. These corners are not good because they are going to generate some self-intersections during the deformation later. So we can fix this very easily by using, you guess, a smooth modifier. There we go, smooth modifier, this one here. So in the smooth modifier, you can see this option, repeat. So let's repeat it many times, to the maximum. I think it's 30, yes. And now this is giving to me a much smoother shape in the entire mesh. But by consequence, you guess, we have to increase a little bit the offset of the shrink wrap a little bit more. Don't worry, it's gonna look like a balloon, but it's gonna be okay. You try your best to offset a little bit the maximum that you can without exaggerating. Now, first of all, save the project, and I'm gonna start to apply all these modifiers. Starting from the top is very important. Go in this arrow and apply. For a faster apply, I'm gonna simply, with the mouse here, I'm gonna press Ctrl A, Ctrl A, Ctrl A. Now we can check immediately the amount of geometry of vertices that we have created for this mesh. So enter edit mode, and you can see up here 2256 vertices. Well, I would like to stay more like 2000 instead of 2200. So let's go back, Ctrl Z many times until I get back all my modifiers, and we can adjust it by playing again with the voxel size. So in this case, I'm gonna increase it a little bit, just a little bit like this. All right, and some parts left outside, of course, don't worry for them. I'm gonna apply again all the modifiers, starting from the top, Ctrl A, Ctrl A, Ctrl A. After some tests, I was able to reach a geometry of 2100. I think it's a good compromise. So now we can turn off the wireframe visualization. It's time to fix these little parts left outside. So to do this, I'm gonna simply select the deform mesh and go in sculpt mode, And in the left part here, you can see this inflate tool is the one that I want to use. With the mouse here, I'm going to press F to increase or decrease the size of the brush. And let's start to inflate all the parts that need a little bit of love, like here, and you have to check in the entire mesh if you are not forgetting some parts, because sometimes they are pretty small and you don't necessarily see them. Let's go on this way, and just ensure that you are not creating this type of ugly corners. As I said before, they are going to generate some self-intersection, so I'm going to adjust this by smoothing. There is the smooth tool here that is useful for this purpose, and by the way, we have to inflate it more after the smooth with a very big brush like this. All right, this is smoother. I'm gonna inflate also this part here, and just some gentle touch until they are covered. All right, and just go on covering all the little parts that need. All right, when you are done covering all the parts, just to check it very carefully that you have covered properly the entire car, sometimes from very close, and we can finally go out from sculpt mode. Let's go in object mode. Now, the first thing to do, if you play the animation, you can see that this mesh is not following the car. Select the deform mesh, and let's actually go out from the isolation. From the outliner, let's hold the control and select also the rigid body of the car. So this mesh here. I'm holding control and check that you have selected these two elements in the right order. So first, the deform body, in fact, is orange, and then holding control, you selected also the body RB, in fact, is a little bit yellow. And then with the mouse here, I'm going to press Control P, set parent to object. This is very important, otherwise the deformation later are not going to happen correctly. And now, if you play the animation, you can see that the deform mesh is following perfectly. Nice. Now for the deformation, yeah, we can still work on the deform mesh, but I need to see also my car that is kind of covered. So I'm gonna go in object properties, all the way down, viewport display as, we can choose wire, so that everything is going to be solid view, but this mesh is going to be in wire mode. Cool. And still that we are speaking about the deform mesh, we don't want this mesh to be visible when we export the scene. So in the deform mesh collection, all the way in the right, there is this icon for the visibility of the render. I'm going to turn off the visibility icon for the entire collection of the deform meshes. All right. Now, before going on, there is one thing that I want you to notice. If you look from the side, we can actually isolate the original car and the deform mesh. Isolate them. If you look from the side, you can notice that there's a common problem that I always have. In this part, there is a lot of extra empty space. So I want to try to edit the shape, bringing these vertices a little bit closer to the mesh here. So with the deform mesh selected, I'm going to press Tab to enter edit mode. And first click outside, like here, to deselect everything. And then press C for the circular selection. I'm going to select some random vertices here like this. And I want also to activate the proportional editing. And this means that now if we move these vertices, we can increase or decrease the area of influence by scrolling down or up the mouse wheel, and just try to get these vertices a little bit closer to the mesh of the car, like so. Yeah, this is gonna be fine. And by consequence, I think we are gonna have to, yeah, let's go out from edit mode. We're gonna have to adjust a little bit more in sculpt mode. So let's check that there are no parts left outside again. So object viewport display as solid. And yeah, there is some little adjustment to do here. So sculpt mode, inflate tool, and just a little bit here, a little bit here, and this should be enough. All right, and we can finally proceed. So object mode, display as wire. And all right, you know what? Instead of wire, we can, at this point, we can actually display as bounds. So we can finally see the actual car that before it was very disturbing to see all this geometry. So instead now, if this mesh is displayed as bounds, we can finally see the effect that it's going to have in the car. So at this point, before proceeding, let's select the original model of the car, this one here. Modifiers, I'm going to give to this mesh a mesh deform modifier. And in the mesh deform, I'm going to use this pick tool in order to choose the target for the deformation that is going to be the deform body, this mesh here. Check twice that you have selected the right mesh, and finally we can click on bind. This is going to take some moments depending on your machine. By the way, from now on, every transformation that is going to happen in the deform mesh is going to be transferred also to the car. And you can actually try it. If you select the deform mesh, enter edit mode, and try to move some vertices, some random vertices that you choose like this, and whatever you are moving, you can see the effect directly transferred to the car. Cool. Ask to abort the operation, exit from edit mode. Now, with the deform mesh selected, I'm gonna go in the modifiers tab, add the modifier displays It's gonna go crazy, don't worry. Just maybe decrease the strength to 0.5. And I'm gonna click on new to generate a new texture. I'm gonna go in the texture panel here. Type of texture, I'm gonna choose clouds, which is the basic noise useful for the deformations usually. And you can play with the size of the texture here. Don't make it too big because it's gonna look weird. Don't make it too small, otherwise it's gonna be too spiky. So something in the mid, something that you like, that is looking like a deformed car. Pay attention that we are still working in the deform mesh. And at the same moment, we are seeing the effect in the car. Now, I will play a little bit more with the size of the texture together with the strength of the displacement, something like this maybe. Strength probably a little bit stronger like this. Cool, but I want another thing. So if you look from the side, when the deformation is gonna happen, like if this is the metal, when the sphere is gonna hit the car, I want to see the metal going down like this, all right? So to make this possible is very easy. Simply in the displace modifier, increase the mid-level function, like a lot. And we can actually do a more precise thing. If you exit from the isolation, and I wanted to isolate the original mesh of the car, the deform mesh, and this time also the rigid body of the car. So we have three objects that I want to isolate, and the reason for this is that now we can clearly see if we are doing the deformation correctly. So select the deform mesh and start again to tweak the mid-level, because my goal is to see that the mesh should go inside the rigid body like this. Okay, this is too much, so I'm going to decrease it right now. I just wanted you to understand what I mean. We just need to go a little bit, just barely inside the border of the rigid body. And the reason for this is that this is going to prevent intersections during your simulation. For example, when the car is going to start to roll down on the floor, I don't want the mesh to intersect with the floor. And so if you stay inside the rigid body like this, the rigid body is going to protect the car from intersecting the floor and stuff like that. Just don't exaggerate with the mid-level, otherwise you're going to make your car flat. Just kind of weird. All right, I think we have a point. We can probably spend some time now playing between the size of the texture and the strength of the displacement. Well, I like this. I think I'm gonna go with this version. Let's go out from the isolation and let's see what we get. So at this point, I wanted to turn off the visibility of the part collection because I wanted to see how this is working. Now, if you play the animation, you can see that the car is completely deformed, but I want this deformation to happen only when the sphere is gonna hit the car. So to do this, select the deform mesh, go in the physics properties, activate dynamic paint. This is gonna be a canvas, so add canvas. I'm gonna choose a surface type weight, there we go, and I'm gonna activate also anti-aliasing for a smoother painting. Under output down here, I'm gonna click on this plus button to generate a vertex group that we can link it in the modifiers, the displace modifier, vertex group. I'm gonna pull out from here the DP weight vertex group. There we go. And this means that now the deformation is gonna happen only in the parts that are gonna be touched by the sphere. But the sphere, select the sphere, it needs to be under physics properties. I'm gonna activate the dynamic paint for the sphere. And the sphere is gonna be instead a brush. It makes sense. There is always a brush and a canvas. So add brush, and as a source, I'm gonna choose mesh volume plus proximity. And now we can try. So press the space bar, select the sphere and move it close to the car. No deformations are happening. And the reason for this is that, let's stop the animation. So we need to select the deform mesh, and in the modifiers tab, the dynamic paint, you can take it from this icon here and drag it before the displacement. The order of the modifiers is very important. So first has to happen the dynamic paint and then the displacement. And now let's retry. Play the animation, select the sphere, press G and start to hit the car. You see the transformation happening. Now it's just a matter of adjusting some settings. So you can see, for example, that the deformation happens way before the sphere is going to touch the car. We can fix this by adjusting the distance option. So select the sphere, physics properties, under dynamic paint somewhere. There we go. Distance. I'm going to lower the distance to 0. I'm going to choose 0.02. All right. Press spacebar and press G. And now it is working correctly. If you interrupt the animation and turn around the car, you can see finally the deformation happening correctly. This is very cool. Nice. Now let's stay in frame 0 and I'm gonna save the project before something is gonna happen. I want to do one test, a crash test basically. I want to destroy almost completely this car, and I will interrupt the animation before it will end. So now, all right. So there's one thing to say, all the values that I am using, they will be subject to changes during the entire course because they are never absolute. For example, the displacement, you can see that is not enough. And so I would like to increase a little bit the strength of the displacement. Modifiers, displacement, I'm going to increase the strength a little bit, so that we can emphasize a little bit more the destruction of the car. You can even play more with the size of the texture if you like. So this is what I want you to understand. There is not an absolute set of settings. It's a continuous adjusting and tweaking until you get something satisfying. All right, and with the first deformation part, we are done. By the way, the process for making the deformation of the body of the car was one thing. Instead, making the deformation setup for all the other parts like the doors or the bumper is gonna be different and much easier. So just don't skip any part of the process because every part is gonna be elaborated in a different way. And actually, the other deformable parts are gonna be much easier to do.